Most people think of childhood trauma as something that happens to you. We think of the shouting, the physical pain, or the chaotic environments. But there is a different kind of trauma, one that isn't defined by what was done, but by what was missing. It's called childhood emotional neglect. It's the trauma of the void. It's the experience of being ignored, overlooked, or treated as if your inner world simply didn't exist. If you grew up in a house where you were fed, clothed, and sent to school, but your feelings were never noticed or validated, you might feel like you have no right to struggle. You might think, my childhood wasn't that bad. Yet, as an adult, you feel a persistent sense of emptiness, a struggle to connect, and an overwhelming feeling that you are fundamentally different from everyone else. Today, we are going deep. We are going to explore the lifelong cost of being ignored as a child, the ways it rewired your brain, the way it dictates your relationships, and ultimately, how you can begin to fill that void yourself. The biology of being seen. To understand the cost, we first have to understand the why. Human infants are the most vulnerable mammals on Earth. We don't just need food, we need mirroring. When a baby cries and a parent looks at them with concern, the baby's brain learns, my feelings matter. I have an effect on the world. This is how the nervous system learns to regulate itself. But when a child is consistently ignored, when they cry and no one comes, or when they share a joy and no one looks up from their phone, the brain interprets this as a threat to survival. In the wild, being ignored by the tribe means death. So the child's brain makes a desperate executive decision. If my feelings are a nuisance to my caregivers, I will stop having them. This leads to a biological shutdown. The prefrontal cortex, which manages emotions, learns to dampen the signals from the amygdala. You essentially mute your own heart to stay safe. But the problem is, you can't selectively mute emotions. When you mute the sadness of being ignored, you also mute your ability to feel deep joy, excitement, and intimacy later in life. Growing up ignored leaves you with what I call psychological debts, patterns you have to pay for every day in your adult life. Let's break down the 5 biggest costs. 1. The invisible self-image. When no one mirrors you, you never develop a clear sense of who you are. You might find yourself constantly asking others for their opinion because you don't trust your own. You feel like a ghost in your own life, but not really there. You struggle to answer the question, what do I want? Because for 18 years, the answer didn't matter to anyone else. 2. Alexithymia, the silent language. Many people who were ignored struggle with alexithymia, the inability to put feelings into words. If no one ever said to you, you look sad, or you seem frustrated, you never learned the vocabulary of your own soul. As an adult, this feels like a heavy, nameless pressure in your chest. You know something is wrong, but you literally don't have the words to tell your partner or your therapist what it is. 3. The counterdependency trap. Because you learned that you couldn't rely on your caregivers to notice your needs, you became hyper-independent. You pride yourself on never asking for help. You think it's a strength, but it's actually a defense mechanism. It's the I'll do it myself wall that keeps people from getting close to you. You're terrified that if you show a need and it gets ignored again, it will break you. 4. The good child syndrome, toxic people pleasing. Some of us responded to being ignored by becoming too good to ignore. You became the straight A student, the perfect athlete, the one who never caused trouble. You thought, if I'm perfect enough, they'll finally look at me. Now, as an adult, you are a chronic people pleaser. You are exhausted from carrying everyone else's emotions while yours sit in the corner, still waiting for their turn. 5. Social anxiety and the spotlight fear. Paradoxically, being ignored as a child often leads to intense social anxiety. Because you weren't vetted by your parents, you feel like a fraud. You're terrified that if people really look at you, they'll see the same nothingness you felt as a child. You want to be seen, but being noticed feels like being under a searchlight in a prison camp. The highest cost is paid in our adult relationships. We tend to recreate the emotional climate of our childhood because it feels familiar, even if it's painful. You might find yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. Why? Because chasing someone's attention feels like home. When they ignore you, it triggers that old childhood drive to be better, do more, earn the love. Or you might be the avoidant one. When a partner tries to give you genuine, consistent love, you feel suffocated. Their attention feels like a demand you can't meet. You might even find yourself picking fights or withdrawing just to get back to that safe state of being alone and ignored. But here is the truth. You weren't ignored because you were invisible. You were ignored because the people who were supposed to look at you were blind. If you spent your life paying these costs, I have good news. The brain is plastic. You can reparent that ignored child within you. Here is where the healing starts. 1. Acknowledge the void. Stop telling yourself it wasn't that bad. Validating your own pain is the first time that ignored child finally feels heard. Write down the things you needed to hear as a kid, but never did. 2. Practice self-mirroring. Several times a day, stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Even if the answer is just tired or bored, name it. You are teaching your brain that your internal state is worth noticing. 3. Break the silence. Find a safe space, a therapist, a support group, or a trusted friend, and practice expressing a need. Start small. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Can we talk? Every time you express a need and it isn't ignored, you are rewiring your nervous system. Being ignored as a child is like starting a race 10 miles behind everyone else. It's a heavy cost, and it isn't fair. But your story doesn't end in the silence. The fact that you're watching this, looking for answers, means that the ignored child inside you is finally speaking up. And this time you are listening. You are no longer invisible. You are here. You matter. And you're worth the effort it takes to heal. If this video spoke to a part of you that's been quiet for a long time, please leave a comment. Sharing your story is often the first step in being seen. Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of healing. I'll see you in the next one.